13, and then the 14th chapter, which will be the third chapter dealing with the Sesh Kumar Leela, inspired by Sukadev's enthusiasm, as I say. The third chapter being Brahma's prayers. So in the chapters of Sakya Pranay here, there are verses from all three of these chapters. I'll read the last concluding paragraph of the commentary of the first verse that we discussed yesterday, that is where Sukha launches into this continued Seshamar narrative, describes the plan of Krishna and how he carried it out. Plan being to have a picnic lunch, a breakfast that would turn into a brunch that would cause him to forget about lunch and stay out longer, herding and playing amongst themselves, investigating and finding out the secrets of the forest, integrating with the animals, the flora and the fauna there. Of course, we heard that embedded in the first text was some significant, what would turn out to be result, I should say, in some significant tattva concerning the emotional composition of Balaram, as that being Sankul Bhav, how his Dasya Bhav will be shown later, when the facts of the liberating of Aghasura come to bear, facts that he didn't know about because, as the text says, or implies, he was not present for the picnic lunch. Krishna has taken his place, ascending the raised platform and blowing his conch, waking everyone up and calling them. Them means millions and millions of cowherds with billions and billions of cows to the compound of Nanda Maharaj. And off they go, describing in intimacy the Sakas, in describing their play, intimacy that the Sakas shared with Shyam, Sukadev, on the Pralay, rhetorically praised the Saka past, that which they must have done to arrive at such Sakya Pranay. So this is where we left off. And this refers to 7 verses of the Bhagavatam, for which there's relatively, or practically speaking, no commentary. I've written about it in a circle of friends, and I want to end this discussion by turning to there and reading that section. It's the section of the Bhagavatam describing the playful nature of these boys' leelas and their intimacy with Krishna that is so stunning to Sukadev that, as I say here, it put him on the verge of pralay. Pralay means to pass out in ecstasy. It's one of the sattvika bhavas. So he's at a tipping point here, seeing this in his inner vision, the play of Krishna, the intimacy of the boys with Krishna, and he's actually quite startled by it, as we'll hear, and it impacts him really for the rest of the chapter. Therefore, at the end of the 12th chapter, he passes out. It's said that there was a chance in the minds of some learned devotees that this might happen. Sukadeva, of course, is an extraordinary sage. His history is very central to the Bhagavatam. And it will come up as we discuss. Then we're going to study as a remedy to the predicament that Parikshit Maharaj found himself in, that he was going to die in 7 days, and he wanted to know what's the purpose of life, what's the best way to view it, how to overcome death. Well, that's what the Bhagavatam teaches, of course, how to overcome death. In a broad sense, you have to die to the ego, die to live, as Sridhar Maharaj used to say. Hegel, and interpreting it in his own mind, in a Gaudiya way. You have to willingly die to the ego, the material identity that's going to die of its own anyway. Trajectory that it arises out of. So you can slay it through sadhana and live another life, right? So, at any rate, as I say, I think it was Januman Jai, the son of Parikshit, thought, this sage, he might. You don't know about these sages. Well, they're very different people. He was only a 16-year-old boy, traveling naked, oblivious to external circumstances. That in itself was a cause for concern. Of course, Januman Jai didn't necessarily know the nature of the Leela narrative, the rasic nature of it, and the pitch of that, the intensity of that, the theological height of it, the ecstasy of it all, that Sukadeva would find himself in the midst of as he entered into the 10th kingdom, and how that might indeed be a tipping point for him. He just thought he might pass out at any time, this guy, who knows. But here we find he held his ground until he reached this point, and then Pralay. So thinking that something like this might happen, then Januman Jai advised, keep kartals and mridanga here for playing kirtan, because that will have the capacity to saw this happen immediately to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? Especially in the Anti Leela, when the external consciousness it withdraws by the force of his inner life, and becomes oblivious to the external world, and within he's experiencing the Leelas of Krishna, and his associates, concerned about his condition from an external point of view, they brought him back to external consciousness by kirtan. Pujyapat Sridhar Maharaj spoke about the occasion in which Mahaprabhu was found in the fisherman's net, and they found him by running into the fisherman, who was behaving in a very extraordinary way, and Swarup Damodar could detect he's been in touch with Mahaprabhu. He must know where he is. And so he said, tell us what made you like this, that fish in the net that I caught. So they found Mahaprabhu, and of course they performed kirtan. Swarup Damodar was an expert kirtanier, Leela kirtanier, and Nam kirtanier. So he chose the more powerful Nam kirtan, because we know that in the kirtan is the Nam. In the Nam is the Rupa, the Guna, the form, the qualities, the associates, and of course the Leelas of Krishna. And this is why Nam Sankirtan is emphasized by our Guru Varga, by our Guru Parampara, over other forms of kirtan. They're also virtuous, no doubt, but Leela will come through Nam, very naturally, right? Kirtana Bhave Smarana Swabhave, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote. By the power, the force of kirtan, Nam Kirtan he's speaking about, then Smaranam, remembrance, meditation, will come about naturally. So the power of Nam in general, of its power in Kali Yuga. It's on the center stage here. So, anyway, Sridhar Maharaj, like to say, when Mahaprabhu came to external consciousness, he said, someone made a noise and broke my meditation. So he said, he considered the kirtan of Swarup Damodar to be noise. How deep then was he? How deep? Kirtan is deep because kirtan brings us to meditation, and if we can enter deep samadhi, right? As we'll hear, this is very different than the samadhi of the jnanis and the yogis and so on. These cowboys, they're in that samadhi. They're doing kirtan. So, of course, this comes at the end of the chapter. Sukadev passes out, and it's been commented along these lines that then Janmanjai's precautionary measure that he put in place was drawn upon, and Sukadev again came to external consciousness. So he is very astounded by what he sees as the intimacy between Krishna and his friends, and then he recites this verse. It's a very famous verse. I'll sing the verse here, and we'll begin to speak about it. Itam satam brahma sukhanubhutya tasyam gatanam paradaivatena mayashritanam naradarakena sakam bijahu krita punya punjaha. What kind of pious acts did they perform to be able to frolic with him in this way? He whose sages see as the bliss of Brahman, Brahma Sukhanubhutya, who the dutifully devoted servants see as the topmost deity, Paradaivatena, and those under the shelter of Maya see as a youthful male, a mere mortal, Naradarakena. This, as I say, is a very, very famous verse, and it begins, as we were just talking about, the kind of tipping, as I referred to it, of Sukadev towards Pralay. So what precedes this, 5 or 7, whatever his verses, describing that play, there's practically no commentary to. It's like render you silent, something like that, right? Stunned, the commentators, stunned. So, but I've written a little commentary. I've described it in a particular way that extends what the text itself says, and I say we'll turn to that at the close to put some icing on the cake of discourse today. But a very famous verse, and incidentally, this is a verse that, well, one thing about the verse is that it's glorifying the friends of Krishna and speaking about their attainment in Sakirasa, how extraordinary that is, right? Well, it exceeds that of entering the Brahman, it exceeds that of Aishvarya, Bhakti, realization in Vaikuntha, and so on and so forth, right? Those are extraordinary attainments in and of themselves. But because it so comprehensively, if you will, as we draw upon it, we'll see, speaks about the virtues of the cowherds and their attainment, we can conclude that it's a very useful verse for us in terms of pursuing the Rag Marg, to commit it to memory and invoke it for, as I say, it is a praise of those who we seek to follow with regard to Sakiras. These friends of Krishna, of course, their names aren't mentioned here. Some names are mentioned as this section of the Bhagavatam goes forward, and we're grateful to the voice of the Bhagavat for naming some of those Stoka Krishna, Sridham, Subal, and so forth. But here, in general, the glorification of the boys, which their attainment is in themselves are one. I saw a book some years ago by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a famous Buddhist monk, Vietnamese monk, and it was called Being Peace. And when I saw the book in a bookstore, I thought, oh, we should write one, Being Love. So our lives as Atmas becomes enhanced by our connection with Bhagavan. By uncovering our connection with Bhagavan, we are his servant, right? And his life becomes enhanced too. Because without that, he'd be sitting still as Brahman, with nothing to say, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Bliss of peace, something like that. In other words, it's this Swarup Shakti manifest, as we're talking about it here, in the form of the devotees, that, that animates the life of the Absolute, or even gives a life to the Absolute, right? So, what is the power of bhakti? But the verse is therefore very useful for us as sadhakas, because following in our line, there's a very famous line from a poetic composition of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the other verses of which I don't know, and I don't know anybody who does know them. They must be preserved somewhere. But this line was taken out of a poem written by Bhakti Siddhanta, which he composed to employ in the establishing of the deity in the marble temple that was constructed by his disciples in Calcutta. This is a famous event. You wouldn't typically find a Gaudiya Vaishnava temple in Calcutta, but in the Dham, in Navadvip, or in Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri, perhaps out of the way of the world. Calcutta was right in the center of the world, in the sense of the capital of the British Empire at the time, right? And the British at that time ruled the world. They were the most influential nation state. And so to build a temple to go to Calcutta even was like Bhaktisiddhanta was advised, don't do that. And Gorkashore Das Babaji Bhakti Vinod Thakur wanted that kind of outreach, as I often say, to put Gaudiya Vaishnavism on the stage of the world religion. So take it to Calcutta, put it on the throne there. So he made an effort to make a temple. It was a famous marble temple, which means it was an expensive temple. If you go to Mayapur, you won't find much marble temples. You'll find the typical brick, concrete, inexpensive temples. And prior to that, and those are really like many of them Gaudiya Math influence, like Mayapur. I mean, Mayapur is the Bhaktisiddhanta Marg. It's the only road. Well, there's a couple more offshoots now, but when I used to go early, 1972, 73, 74, like that, that was the only road was Bhaktisiddhanta Marg, and there were no, it was just rice fields practically, right? And villagers living, it's agricultural setting. But many temples sprouted up, mostly Gaudiya Math temples. And of course, there was the temple of Yogapith, built by, envisioned by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and the assistance of Bhakti Siddhanta, erected and so forth. That was a big temple, but for centuries, it wasn't the case that the Gaudiyas were building big temples. In fact, the brother of Bhakti Siddhanta, Lalit Prasad, who was a younger brother who served with him and assisted him for some time, but then he had differences from Bhakti Siddhanta, which caused him to discontinue working with him. And he accused Bhakti Siddhanta of, well, he has left the Rag building all these big temples. There's not the Rag Marg. Rag Marg is not archan, big temples. It is meditation, nam, bhajan, and so on and so forth. It was one of his criticisms. He has other criticisms, not worth mentioning. If I do, they'll not? Big temple. These are big temples. Big, 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 big stone temples. And who was erecting them? Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, right? And putting Vrindavan back on the map in terms of the world, the material world, right? Attracting people there. So there's some place for that, some precedent for that. You know, there's some precedent for not building temples also. But we should see, according to time and circumstance, what is the vision and the seva of the particular acharya. It may be building big temples, it may be building no temples, right? And, but he celebrated the opening of the Calcutta temple, and in connection with that, he wrote a poem. So one of the lines from the poem has become very famous. In fact, she engraved it on the stone over the altar of his temple in Koladvip, in Navadvipdam. Goes like this. Some of you know, Putla Ragapata Gaurava Bangai Matala Harijan Kirtanarange. Kirtanarange Matala Harijan Vishayarange is the original. Vishayarange. Sri Maharaj changed it to Kirtanarange just to bring out some of the implications more powerfully of the verse. But the rag, it refers, again, it pertains to the opening of the temple because the verse says that our orientation to Rag Marg will be to revere those devotees who are the Ragatmikas. We will not worship, we are not worshiping Krishna with all, but we are bowing down with great Gaudava, respect and awe to these Ragatmika devotees, the Gopikas, the Gopas, these personification, full face of the Swarup Shakti that making up the Leela, the Ragatmikas. The kind of love that they embody and how it corresponds with who God is in the fullest sense of the term, his inner emotional life, goodness. So we have regard for them. So we will, Ujjala Ragapata Gaurava Bhangi, we will, more or less the same, we will, with Gaurava, we will worship the Raga, which means worship these people, Rup Shakti. And they're not blind, Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj used to say. So they're very kind. Their eyes are open. To agree with this? You like what we're doing? And their affection will come to us, right? Krishna's attention will come to us. You want to like me like they do? It's very rare. Are you sure? Most people want mukti. If they want, or they want things. They want things from me. Or they want to get away from things. Or they worship me because they're supposed to, because I'm God. But these people wrestle me to the ground. They steal my flute, the gopis. You want to be like that? You understand that? A little bit. But we like it because our guru feels like this, so we are following him. Well, Krishna's attention will come to us, right? And their attention. So puja ragapata gaurava bhange matala harijana kirtanaranga. Vishayarange. So then by worshiping them and broadcasting through kirtan and opening temples that people can come and perform kirtan and so forth, and make your zone wherever there is Maya. Everybody's got a zone. This is my zone. This is my Bhaktisiddhanta Sadhya. My zone is wherever there's Maya. We will go there. We will go there. Bring the son of Krishna. So we by kirtan, that it is said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, 80% of his preaching was what the Rag Marg is not. Because it might look like something other than what it is. Like I said the other day, Nityam Bhava walking naked with long dreadlocks and so forth. You know, remember one year in Vrindavan we were staying, and a number of devotees, and Rinaranya came back from the market and told us that she'd been chased by a Nagabab, naked sage, saw a blonde girl, right, from America and chased her, and some of the shopkeepers had like, I mean, in public. This is a guy coming from the Himalayas, right, living in a cave. So those that tapasya gyan, that's not so effective as bhakti, right? Kam Vijay. This is Rasa Leela. Kam Vijay. It's called the Leela by which Kam is conquered. Cupid is conquered. It doesn't look like that, so we have to pay very close attention, right? To understand the Bhagavatam, which means we need good sadhusanga, good mentorship, right? We need the book Bhagavatam. What else? Bhagavatam. This Namaskar verse that introduces or praises the deity presiding over his book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna's, explains that verse in the context of explaining Bande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Godadai Pushpabond Chitro Chitrasano Tamonudo Chitrasando Tamonudo. They come and they take away the desires for dharma, artha, and they bestow prema. And Krishnadas Kabir says the way in which they bestow prema is by bringing us in touch with two Bhagavatas, Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. After Prabhupada departed, and there was some confusion on the part of his disciples how to proceed. Hey, there's the book Bhagavat, so that's all we need is the book Bhagavat. Person Bhagavat that is not here, we have the Bhagavat. So all we need is Prabhupada's books. But the Chaitanya says you need both. Of course, they had both, but the fact that they would think like that indicates they still needed both. They needed further person Bhagavatam to help them understand the philosophy a little better. You can't do away with one for the future with kind of a Ritvik perspective. We don't need any more gurus. We got the books, book Bhagavat. And that's not what the book Bhagavat says. If we understand it through Chaitanya Charitamrita as we should, right? So if Sage Sukha, what was the point? Who could be he's so overtly transcendental, spiritual person, and he is doing what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said in his verse, right? He's singing about the glories of these. Well, we'll read that part as we conclude. I said, they're doing this, and then he makes a concluding verse. What does it mean to him? Who are they? How extraordinary they are. So it's a praise of them. The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said we should go everywhere and praise the Rag Marg. Talk about what it's not, because it's easily misunderstood, and a little about what it is also. That's important, right? Of course, as time goes on, we can talk a little bit more about what it is, because the world will have been more introduced to it, right? Tastefully, with emphasis on where to go, but equal, if not more, emphasis on what to do now, in here and now, that you may go there. What is the next step to take? So, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his approach to Rag Marg, said, we will do kirtan glorifying the Rag Marg. We'll have reverence for the Rag Marg. We'll praise it. We'll distinguish it from everything that could be misconstrued to be it. And do away with that. Abolish that from the world. The misunderstanding of parakia on the part of some Baba. Not good. That kind of thing. So, strong emphasis like this. And then he said, and naturally, that God of that reverence will be broken, will be naturally broken, because these associates, hearing us praise what Rag Marg really is, in reverence for that, open the gates, let us in. This was his idea. So verses like this, they're very useful for us for following the Rag Marg in the spirit of and according to, if you can say, really the directives of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you want to add some meditation, some mantra, Mai Upasana, here's a nice verse for that, for the reasons I've explained, right? Also about this verse, a nice point, a historical point, if you will, comes to mind, and that is that you know that Prabhupada was fond of the a song written by Bhakti Vinod. I forget the name of it, but it's famous as Jai Radha Madhava, as it begins, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, right? Prabhupada used to sing that at the beginning of every class, so he liked that song very much. And after his passing, some people have said, see that Prabhupada, he always sang this song, Jai Radha Madhava, therefore he must be in Madhurya Rasa, because this is a Madhurya Rasa song. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Glories to Radha Madhava in the Kunja, and so forth. So there you go. There's your evidence. So persons, you know, they make some reasonable conjectures as to his inner life and so forth based on such things, but they should be open to response to that. And I'll give you a response to that. Prabhupada himself gave a commentary on this song, and it's available in the they have a database of things that Prabhupada wrote and spoke and so forth, available there. Prabhupada comments on the song. And he says, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, you know, praising Radha and Krishna in the forest of Vrindavan. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Balaba, Giri Baridhari. Then he would emphasize Giri Baridhari, a little bit of the Aishvarya of Krishna. He would emphasize lifting the Govardhan hill. So how can he's a 7-year-old boy lifting the Govardhan hill? Therefore, we have to factor that in, you know, if we are going to understand Kunja Bihari. Who is in the Kunja? What are they doing? Who is that? Looks like an ordinary boy in a forbidden or prohibited or socially unacceptable relationship with a young girl in the forest, but he's Giri Varidhari. So he want to balance the Aishwarya and the Madhurya. Yashoda Nandana, Brajajana Ranjan. And then he starts talking about Vatsalya Rasa. This is what the verse is about, right? Giri Bhattacharya, in a sense, speaks for everything. He's doing he acts like a child. He's upset with his mother and so forth. What makes him so charming in this is that he's a lifter of Govardhan Hill. He has that Aishvarya. Backdrop to his Madhurya, his sweetness, in these relationships of Vatsalya, Madhurya, and Sakya, is that he's God, acting like this, like one of us, really like one of us, which, as I say many times, that enables us to emotionally bond with him in ways that you cannot with any other deity, in any other religion, because no other form of God that's worshipped in any other religion is so human-like. That they do things that we go, I know what that's like. I know what that's like. I'm there. I have that feeling too. He's like us. This is what prema is about. He's mine. He's one of us. Not that he's over there worshiping from a distance, right? So, in that sense, the Giri Baridhari is central, and then Madhurya Ras is mentioned at the onset. Then Vatsalya Ras. Then he says what? Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Krishna's roaming along the banks of the Jamuna. Prabhupada starts talking about that. And then he says, Itam satam brahmasukhanubhutya tasyagatanam paradaivatena mayashritena naradarakena sakam vijahu kritapunya punja. He sings this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So he's come to the end of the song, Jamuna Tira Vanachari. He's thinking, the way he is interpreting Jamuna Tira Vanachari, the cowherd boys, they're playing along the banks of the Jamuna. Oh, what a wonderful sight. This is so extraordinary. So this, it's significant that this verse, so pertinent to Sakyaras Upasana, or the pursuit of Sakyaras as we're speaking about it, is what came in his heart when thinking and commenting to us about the song. He trails off in that. He just kind of goes almost unconscious. Itam satam brahmasukhan bhutya. Elevated things are talked about in this verse. Brahmasukha, paradaivatena, and more. So we'll go through it. Special verse. Itam satam brahmasukhanubhutya, he says, Sukadev, that what is the position of these cowherd boys? What have they attained? What have they done to attain a position that is not attainable? The implication is by sages meditating on Brahman, those jnanis who want to attain Brahmasukha, Brahmananda. They're like Sukadev used to be. Now he's changing here. He's reciting the Bhagavatam. He's becoming a gopi, realizing more deeply of the prospect of the Atma in transcendence. He had it, in Bhaktivinoda's language, an indistinct understanding of what it meant to be liberated. He was a Jivan Mukta, but in means Brahman realization. So Sukadev himself is saying this right here. He says, Itam satam brahmasukhanubhutya. Satam brahmasukhanubhutya. Satam is a word that is often invoked in the Bhagavad in a broad sense you could say sages, but it's often clarified by our commentators to mean the truthful, and by that it means devotees. Devotees are sages. This is what Krishna says in the Gita. Mahatmanastu mam parta daibim prakritim ashrita. He talks about different types of worshippers in the 9th chapter, and then he comes to this. Mahatmanas. But the Mahatmas, the great Atmas, the real sages in the full sense. Mahatmanas tu mam parta, Arjun, my dear cousin. Mahatmanas tu mam parta. Daivim prakritim ashrita. They are moving. They are not sitting still. They are moving and playing and completely captivating me and capturing my full attention under the influence of my Daivin, my internal Shakti, my Swarup Shakti. These are Mahatmas, devotees. So Satam means devotee. Therefore, it's important here when we note as an aside, when we're talking about jnanis who are preoccupied with Brahmasukha, this doesn't mean those who will offend the form of Bhagwan and say it is only provisional and it has no standing in transcendence. This is an Advaitin perspective. We take exception to this, right? But there are sages like Sukadev. They have little bhakti for Krishna, but their understanding is the pursuit should be of this feature. They don't offend the form of God. So these devotees, or these jnanis whose jnana is, some bhakti is factored in, they will attain Brahmasukha if they so desire. Therefore, you can understand why it's been said, and we talked about this the other day, why some persons absorbed in Brahmasayuja may go to Vaikuntha by Krishna's grace. Because they're not against him. But against him, what does Bhagavatam say? In the second verse, second. Hari Muni is said to have lived under the waters in the Jamuna. Now that's pretty good yoga to be able to hold your breath that long under the water, right? But Garuda came there to capture some fish. So he took exception to Garuda, and out of sattvic parabdha, compassion for the fish, he offended Garuda, for whom fish is part of his diet. The sea. So, special case. Garuda. Snakes too. Watch out. So, he offended Garuda out of sattvic compassion for the fish. And what happened? He didn't understand Vaishnavism. He offended a great Vaishnav. And so all of his austerities, all of his penances that took him apparently so he could live without breathing for who knows how long before he came up for a breath. Right? This example is given in the Bhagavad to tell us something, right? Make a point, right? That because he didn't have regard for bhakti, personified in the form of Garuda, he lost his position. He fell from there. He became worldly, completely worldly. So this is not the kind of sage that's being mentioned here. Satam. Itam satam brahmasukhanubhutya. Those who have a little bhakti, but they have the ideal, for lack of association, sadhu sangha, and so forth, of identifying with the undifferentiated feature of the Absolute. And as I say, Sukadev himself was in this position. And he's saying about these people, like him, which he is no longer like. He's given that idea up altogether. He heard the Bhagavatam, some verses, sung by the woodcutter, sent by Vyas, to bring wood, equipped with poetry from the Bhagavatam. Verses like, Oh, Bhakiyam Stanakalakutam. Oh, how fortunate is who in the right mind would take shelter of anyone else but Krishna, who gave Vatsalya Bhav to Putana. Verses like this. In the hopes, Vyasadeva, that his son, Sukadeva, who had gone to the forest, would hear that poetry of the Bhagavatam. And he had confidence in the poetry of the Bhagavatam. Sukadeva would hear it, that he'd come back. And he realized there's more. There's more to be known about the nature of transcendence. So we heard the verses. He came back. He heard the Bhagavatam. Now he's a speaker of the Bhagavatam. And he's belittling Brahmasukha in comparison to what these cowherd boys represent, what they have attained. Right? This is sages, what they undergo to attain that. I mean, or extraordinary austerities, leaving home, leaving the world, I said, going to the Himalayas, living in a cave, standing in the Ganga up to your neck in the month of Magh, February, March, February, the coldest month of the year, to realize there's no difference between hot and cold. It's all in the mind. Hmm? To transcend these dualities, hot, cold, good, bad, happy, sad, where the soul resides beyond these dualities that are only perceptions, right, in the mind. They go to great, 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 great austerities and extremes to realize this. So that individuality of the ego is false, and we are all one. Consciousness is everything, and the world is false, just an appearance, and so on and so forth. And and they have the idea that just by this kind of like, it's very mental, and I wouldn't even call it intellectual. It's very mental. They're going to think themselves into I am Brahman, and that they've accomplishes what Sukadev accomplished, or what so many sages in history, where this whole doctrine, this whole teaching comes from, what they went through. So many examples are there in the past, in the history, and so many in the present as well. What they're doing, based entirely on an entire a whole system that's been in place for thousands of years. Realize the Atma and its oneness with Brahman. Muktanam, right? And again, Bhagavatam. And what does the Gita say? Manushana sahasreshu chidyatati. You're just going to think your way into that? Talk, uninformed people with no credit to the tradition itself, where the ideas come from. It's this like Western exceptionalism. Let us take a little Indian theology here, and we'll make it better, more accessible. You can have it right now. Just think your way to it. No, it's very unappealing. The real sages he's talking about here, who actually attained Brahmasukha, did they undergo to attain that? What kind of activity perform? They're extraordinary if you list them. The point being here, what, in contrast, what these boys have attained is something far more extraordinary. What did they do? But he goes into progression. He says, what there were the sages who know the absolute as Brahman, and then there are those who actually worship Bhagwan, Paradaivatena, as the supreme deity. They know not only of his existence as Brahman, but they know of his Aishvarya, his Aishvarya Leela, and so they worship him. They attain Vaikuntha, and that Bhaidi Bhakti is very, very nice, but very strict. But it's very strict life, right? And so he says, some know him as Brahman, those kind of sages. Some know him as the supreme deity, and they've known him. They arrive at that knowing by a particular practice, his Aishvarya. Some know he exists. Some know he's his Aishvarya, and these people know his Madhurya, his sweetness, and they are bringing out sweetness. Right? They correspond with that sweetness. He says another thing too. He says, some people know him as Brahman. Some people know him as the supreme deity, and approach him accordingly. And some people in the world, Mayashritena, under the influence of Maya, they think he's just an ordinary person, an ordinary cowherd boy. You may say, yeah, there is some historical evidence that there was a Krishna. Okay, there is some historical evidence. There's some coins that have Shankarshan and Vasudev on either side, heads and tails, right? Two heads, no tails, and 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 there are other historical evidence for them. And some people thought they were God, and they made these stories up about them, and so on and so forth. That's true. Some people thought they were God, but they saw him, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Bilotine, with eyes of love, and they could see him. You know, in the Mahabharata, when the Kurukshetra war, Krishna was trying to ward it off, a last-ditch effort. He came to Hastinapur, and in the course of some discussion, he showed his Virata Rupa, universal form, version of it. And everybody was, oh my God. And senses in relation to sense objects, not for their own pleasure, but for the pleasure of the senses of Krishna. This will give a new identity, because your present identity is arising out of how you use your senses in relation to sense objects for their own pleasure. This solidifies and fosters a particular identity of who I am. I like this, I don't like that. Rather than what's good for bhakti, what's not good for bhakti. It becomes my new criterion for good and bad, likes and dislikes. Transcending the likes and dislikes determined by my mind, right? So we have an identity, material identity, and this is what it arises out of. We bring our senses in touch with sense objects. I like this, I don't like that, and then this is forming an identity. So if an identity will arise out of such, then will not another identity arise if we take the same senses of this body, bring them in touch with sense objects, which they naturally do, sounds, tastes, forms to see, and when in contact with those sense objects, we use them for the pleasure of Hrishikesh, Krishna, the master of the senses. What will happen? An identity will arise out of that, of Krishna Das. Will unfold in due course. Right? So here, some people, it said, the third part, some see him as Brahman, as a supreme deity, some see him as a person. Prabhupada said, only a few people knew who he was. Most of them were living in out back, like almost like Aboriginal people. Well, they were cowherd people living in the forest, in the jungles. What do they know about anything? They're not educated people. Well, they might make their friend their god. They do that in all the villages, right? There's some gods. They had another one, another goddess, right? So what do they know? Few people. Well, the Bhagavatam tells a different story. They know him. They know him. In his Aishvarya, well, he went to Mathura, okay. He went to Dwarka. Okay. City people got to know him, so they liked him. Yeah. Maybe they've told some tall tales, exaggeration over centuries of time, and so on and so forth. So, yes, Mayashritena Naradarakina. Some people think him who are under the influence, the verse says, under the influence of the Maya Shakti, they think of him as an ordinary person. Krishna says it in the Gita. Abhajanati mamudha manusim tanamashrita. Some people They don't understand my form as I'm appearing before you, Arjuna. They think I'm an ordinary person. So, three types of people are mentioned here, and he contrasts them. Some see him as Brahman, some see him as a supreme deity, some see him as an ordinary person. But these boys, how do they see him? How did they arrive at this perception of him and intimacy that they have with him? Krita punya punja. The verse says punya. Well, they must have performed a lot of pious activities, some people would think. No, that's not, cannot say it like that. Because pious activities, according to for example, the socio-religious system of Varnashram, that cannot give you bhakti. It cannot give you brahmasukha, because you will have to give up the dharma marg, the karma marg, the varnashram, to attain brahmasukha. That's what the Gita says. Sarva dharman purityaja, mamekam. Well, mamekam. Sarva dharman, give up religion. Some people interpret it to mean, and take sannyas. If you interpret it like that, well, it's true. Sannyas means leaving the varnashram, leaving the world. They go off into the Himalayas, right? They're not worried about how they look. They may be naked sage. So anyway, these boys, what did they do? They didn't do punya karma. It's not that they built a whole lot of pious, good karma rewards for the activities they performed, and as a result, they got this. Even to attain brahmasukha, that won't work. Just performing pious activities in varnashram, you have to come to the point of transcending the dharma marg, to come to gyan. So it cannot be referring to this. But it has different, their spiritual logic, their Shastra Yukti. Of course, the Goswamis have commented on the verse appropriately. Sanatana Goswami says, according to Amara Kosh, punya also means beautiful. Perform beautiful activities. He says, beautiful means sadhana, like Shravana. That means they did bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, this, and beautiful activities. They went door to door on behalf of Krishna. Many doors were slammed in their face. And they sang my name, and many people ridiculed them. They advocated my cause and my philosophy and abused for that. And I could hardly bear it for so long. I was looking down, out, as Krishna told Gopakumar. Every day, I would go to herd cows with my friends. Every day I would look down the path, unbeknownst to them. Where is he? Is he coming today? Will he come today? When will he arrive? My sadhaka, Gopakumar. Gopakumar was the Narmasaka, right? He was telling his story. He told to Jana Sharma, and I arrived in Golok, and when Krishna embraced me in a trance, tearfully, and then came back to external consciousness within the Leela, that he told me this. I knew everything, all the trials and tensions of your life as a sadhaka that you underwent for me. That is beautiful, so beautiful. That is your punya. And And I waited. Mm. Again, every day I look, is he coming today? In eternity, is he coming today? And here you are. Mm. So we should be encouraged as sadhakas. What is the sadhana in Gaudiya Vaishnavism? To afford us the opportunity to attain Gopi Bhav or Sakya Bhav, as is the case here. Mm. This is the question of Sukadev. His mind is just, head is spinning. What were those activities? How did they attain this? How extraordinary! Hmm? He's glorifying bhakti, the path, the way, and the prayojan, the abhideya and the prayojan at the same time. Hmm? And so we have this explanation of the verse, and just briefly then, there's another explanation of the verse that's charming that Sanatana Goswami has offered with regard to Mayashritena Naradharakena. The third type of person who thinks of Krishna as an ordinary person because he's under the influence of Maya Shakti. He says, well, there's two types of Maya, Mahamaya and Yoga Maya. And the gopis worshipped Yoga Maya. They wanted to get Krishna, who they thought was an ordinary boy like themselves, as their husband. So some people worship him as Brahman. Some people worship him as the supreme deity. And some people, the gopis, under Maya, Yoga Maya, they worship Katyayani to get him as their husband. But what these boys have done to be associated with him in this way, he said, this is blowing my mind. What kind of piety did they perform? So he's saying in a very beautiful way, this is a gopi, budding gopi bhav. How is it better than the gopis' love? It's clear it's better than the sages' love, right? The view of tattva, better than Vaikuntha. But from a bhava point of view now, he's in the bhava, he's in gopi bhav. And he's saying this. He thinks they're better, they're the best, because look at, they can play with him openly. This is their bhav. Subal comes out of this. Right? Radharani says, oh, how lucky is Subal. He can walk arm in arm with Krishna like this, public, right? That's sometimes we say, oh, Subal is this moment, right, in Radha's love for Krishna. Radha in Sakyabhav, something like that. Like a male expansion, as the gopis are, Kaya view of Radha, something like that. So those who say, no, this Gaudiya Vaishnava is Manjari, not Sakyabhav. That real Manjaris, real gopis don't talk like that. Here's a real gopi. In Bhava, we say, Gopi Bhava, that is the highest reach. We're announcing that. We are proclaiming that. Right? Here, and so many, we give so many of Sakas claiming this and proclaiming this in so many ways. Nityananda Prabhu giving Gopi Bhav to the world, as Vrindavan Das says. And who could be a greater Saka than him? We have so much regard for that ideal. Krishna, this is his romantic life. How can we not be concerned about that? Glorify that, praise that, sing its virtues everywhere, right? We do. And those who really have that bhav, who really understand that bhav even, really just thought about it deep instead of just they heard something and they used it now to make others think or make themselves think that they're better off than they were. They've attained something more because they can say something somebody didn't know. Mana, Manjari Bhav is best. Yeah, we say it's best. We also say. And what do the Manjaris say? They say Gopi Bhav is best. That's what they say. We say that Gopi Bhav is best. And Gopis say, as he is here, in Bhava, they actually have the Bhava. They feel like this. What is their good fortune? Hmm? Sukadev ki jai, right? So now we're going to conclude here, and I'm going to extend the class, as I mentioned at the beginning, to read to you what it is that these boys were doing that caused Sukadev to state this verse, to state his amazement as he did here. Okay? Bear with me, my friends. The boys carried their picnic lunches in sacks, tied on the end of sticks held over their shoulders. But instead of thinking about lunch, their minds and senses were captivated by the enchanted forest, which turned down the fire of each boy's digestion. When these fires did burn, they burned as much for appeasing Krishna's hunger as their own. After all, he is himself, as he says in the Gita, the fire of digestion, and he lives only for the nourishment of his friends. If they are pleased, he is pleased. If he is pleased, they are pleased. Sometimes they serve him, and sometimes he serves them. In either case, he is satisfied, the two being one in fraternal love. In this spirit, they sported, the boys, as equals with Krishna. Enchanted by the prospect of play that the forest held, they tied their lunches onto tree branches to free both hands for collectively stealing and concealing the lunch of one of their comrades. They tossed it above their heads to one another, keeping it out of the tearful owner's reach. Boundless sky of playful, loving friends. Sometimes, and sometimes Krishna's friends stole his lunch, tossing it amongst themselves, playing keep away with it. On such occasions, one boy from a poor family would throw his lunch to Krishna and then sit down with Krishna's more opulent lunch and eat the rich puri, halava, kachuri, and ladus, while Krishna sat with him and happily ate his friend's simple rice, chapati, and sabji. Such was their playful love and union that gave way to love and separation when Krishna was drawn by the beauty and mystery of the forest to venture unaccompanied, having sent his sakhas to search for their calves. The boys' hearts, grown fonder by the fuel of such separation, drove the vehicles of their bodies in a race to catch up to Krishna, each exclaiming, "I will touch him first. No, I will touch him first." And together they all touched him, each first in his own mind, each proudly and appropriately claiming victory, proud to give pleasure to Krishna as their union triumphed over separation. Such is Sakya Prem, proud yet pure. They played their flutes to indicate one thing and then suddenly another, the wisdom of the cowherds alone capable of grasping their intentions. Some blew their horns such that the sounds made Krishna laugh, while others considered their horns harmonious with the natural sounds of the forest, the sounds of the birds, bees, and crickets. Thus the boys imitated these natural sounds themselves. In this way, with all of their sounds together, both natural and unnatural, created a supernatural concert, not only pleasing to the ear, but profound, resolving all philosophical conundrums. Some boys realized that it was speed first and foremost for which cowherds are praised, and thus they chased and magically appeared to catch their own shadows. Others imitated the gracefulness of the swans, the songs of the kern, dancing of the peacocks, thinking themselves high-minded and their games superior to the shadow-chasing antics of their friends. Seeking to outdo everyone else, others climbed high and imitated the monkeys, declaring themselves to be the best of yogis, moving about dexterously without ever touching the ground. However, others made similar claims of levitation, while chanting Omkar in imitation of the croaking frogs and leaping along with them. Joining the competition, others chanted Narayan into the hollow of caves in reciprocation with their echoes, while others, upon Krishna's suggestion, simply looked at their own reflections in the water in the mockery of self-worship, ahangaropasanam. In the midst of such amusement, the youngest boys served Krishna and personally, as he relished these astonishing antics of the other skillful and playful cowards. Indeed, Sukadev was not exaggerating when he exclaimed in awe that the magic of Maya, the gnosis of the Gyanis, the yoga of the yogis, the bhakti of the bhaktas, such as Narada, are all surpassed by such sakhas prem. Thus he was puzzled as to how these boys attained a measure of love that turns God into a coward, an equal. It is to sages, such as Sukha, that I offer this bold book as an answer, seeking their approval and blessing. If not by karma, gyan, yoga, or vaidhi bhakti, it must be by mercy alone, mahat kripa, that these cowards attain such good fortune. And so says Sri Rupa in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Sri Rupa Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavata ki jai. Bauji Gopal ki jai. Radha Govinda ki jai. Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva patitanam bhavane vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Ananda Kodi Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Guru Maharaj ki jai.